Welcome back to Nick Lenz's Comic Corner, Classic List Non-Classics. This is episode number 1959, and, Doubleshot number 1853. Got two DC trades through. If you're curious around my finger, I got a paper cut. That basically causes me to bleed. That's the reason for that. Now, the first trade here does contain some characters who were created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, but not all of them. I'd say about 2 or 3 of them are. The rest are just creations of other characters. We have the first trade, the first of 3 trades to collect the series, The Astonishing Ant-Man, which is the relaunch of the Ant-Man title done by Nick Spencer. This, of course, retains him as the writer, but they decided to relaunch the book. After only 5 issues, the book had just started that very year, and they hit the restart button. Like, really? 5 issues? Well, in here, they decided to throw in here, in this trade itself, before we get to the main issues, which by from the main series, Astonishing Ant-Man, they only collect the first 4 issues of the series. They include here just 4 that include two one-shots published between issue 5 of Ant-Man. Well, this is kind of between volume because the first one they were trying to do, they got canceled. Between that volume and the start of this book, first we have the Ant-Man Annual, which this could have been issue 6 of the series, but for some reason they decided to make this the annual for some reason, because it's a team-up story where you have Scott Lang team up with Hank Pym, the original Ant-Man. And it's all still in the story that Egghead is alive. Yes, the classic Ant-Man villain who died back in the 80s is alive. Somehow, they don't really explain how the heck he survived being freaking accidentally killed by Hawkeye. Yes. So he was firing a special gun he made to basically kill Hank Pym. So basically, Hawkeye fires one of his arrows at the gun, and that backfires, killing him. And he was put on trial by the Avengers for this, and he got off scot-free. The police basically wrote off as self-defense because, well, he was pointing a gun at Hank Pym. So, yeah, basically Hawkeye killed somebody in self-defense. I think this is actually one of the very few times Hawkeye has ever officially killed anybody in the comics. But he killed an Ant-Man villain, Egghead. Yes. Now, also in the story, in this annual, that Scott Lang's helmet that he had, which is actually he retrofitted it, be cool, and Hank's like, it was already cool. So apparently inside of the helmet was an old lab of his. Yes, which he apparently forgot about until recently. Here's a fun fact for you about this annual. This annual, the main story itself was set before the events of Avengers Rage of Ultron one-shot. Came out the very same year. As of currently, in the main books, Hank Pym is considered to be deceased because Ultron killed him. Yes, Ultron, one of the greatest enemies in the history of the Avengers, killed his creator, Hank Pym. And Marvel writes him up as dead because they have Scott Lang around, don't need to have him around. So, what happened to the Giant Man suit? Well, that went to a guy named Roz, a guy who's gay. Don't have a problem with that at all. And he pretty much becomes the Giant Man. He basically is still continuing with Giant Man this very day. It's a good annual, I got to hand to it. The Last Days one-shot, this could easily be issue 7. But nope, it had to be a one-shot. I don't know why. It is by far, I think, like the only one-shot called Last Days, because everything else was like issues, had titled Last Days, not a one-shot. The one-shot itself was mostly a wrap-up of that particular run. You could say it's after the annual, kind of. But this particular one, I kind of talked about this one already in the Last Days trade. Excuse me. Basically, the woman who's financing Hank Pym's security firm is a retired superhero. Which, okay, interesting. Of course, the Last Day stuff. And here's the strange thing. This woman never appears ever again. This actually is her first time she's appeared in the book since issue 1. Yes. So they start off the Astonishing Ant-Man book where it jumps ahead 8 months future. They kind of do this flash forward so we have Hank Pym in prison. Now, basically the book is going to explain how the heck that happened. In the events of the previous book, Darren Cross was revived after he died back in the late 70s of a heart attack. Yep, he got revived thanks to a heart transplant done to him by a doctor who gave him the heart of Cassie Lang, the daughter of Scott Lang. Now, apparently, this was kind of weird. Apparently, all the pin particles she had was inside of her heart. So apparently, when it got heart transplant, she apparently lost the pin particles. This basically does play a role in the book here. So, it's also revealed, and they kind of reveal this also in the annual as well, that apparently Hank Pym has slept with the female Beetle. Now, if you're curious to who created the female Beetle, why, that was, of all people, and I kid you not, this is who created him. Excuse me, creator. Ed Brubaker. Yeah, Ed Brubaker created her. It was actually toward the end. It's actually just before the relaunch of the main Captain America title. That's when she showed up for the first time ever. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the thing with the female Beetle is she's actually a legacy character. And there she is right there. Yeah, her father is... I kid you not. Her father is... This is not a joke. Lenny Thompson Lincoln, a.k.a. Tombstone, a Spider-Man villain. Yes. Now, we also have in here the Grizzly. The Grizzly is a creation of Jerry Conway. Here's a strange fun fact for you. Did you know he actually appeared at the start of the original Clone Saga? Yes. And his first line is, "The Grizzly's back in town." Yes, that seriously was his very first line back at the very start of the original Clone Saga. You also have Porcupine and Whirlwind. Now, fun fact about this Porcupine here, who also was appearing later on in the pages of Spider-Woman, when it was written by Dennis Hopeless, and of course he appeared in the most recent book where he was dating Jessica Drew. Then he broke up with her for stupidity. This guy is actually not the original Porcupine. Yeah, let me explain about him. His real name is Roger. He's a creation of Jim Poundman and Justin Gray. Yes. Now, the original one has been deceased for years. He's been dead since the 80s. He was actually killed in some all-out villain attack. Now, Whirlwind here, that is a classic Ant-Man villain. Yeah, he's a creation of Stanley, Jack Kirby, no problem. There's a funny way where they have Ant-Man security solutions where they have, he deal with these people, and of course the Investor, and after stuff with Young Avengers, because Cassie misses her powers, and Augustine Cross, who's Darren Cross's son, which, by the way, prior to this run, right to the original line coming out, no one knew. The only relative that Darren Cross had was Crossfire, who was his cousin. Yeah, no one had any idea this guy was actually, well, yeah, and Augustine is actually Darren Cross's son. Who's the mother is never explained. So, yeah, he basically calls him daddy because he's very close to him. Darren was like, okay, yeah. And then we have the Power Broker. Now, the Power Broker, part of this book, apparently he's a very obscure villain. Yeah, apparently Nick Spencer decided to have this thing where, let's throw in some obscure villains into this book for, like, no reason. Power Broker, well, let me point this out to you. He actually is, up here is actually not the original one. This actually is the second one. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they actually started a storyline that will basically encompass this whole run. The Hench app. Yes, the Hench app. Basically, we have an app because everything's got apps nowadays. So, we got app for this, app for that. So, want to have an app that hires assassins or henchmen. I'm like, that's a really interesting plot idea. This very original idea. First person hired by this is Whirlwind. Yep, Whirlwind. Excuse me. Then the project is canceled. Okay, he's actually made his first appearance back in the Avengers Initiative Annual. So, this guy here, Power Broker, he's the creation of Dan Slott. No joke, he seriously is. Now, this is something quite interesting, though, about this character. When people think of Dan Slott, what's usually one character people think of when we think of characters he created? Especially for villains. Usually the first character people think of is Mr. Negative. Which, yes, he did create him. I believe he also created Overdrive as well, who was part of the new version of the Sinister Six, who had their own spin-off title, Spearful Six. So, interesting idea that, well, Nick Smith dug this guy up after he probably haven't seen in several years. We also have it where we revisit a romance from the Mad Faction FF run. This was Future Foundation book where you had Scott Lang dating Darlene, who was Miss Thing, who, get this, at the start of the book, she basically had always slept with Johnny Storm, and now she basically was dating Scott Lang. And she's kind of a recurring character in this book, and basically, it's an expensive. He basically revisited the romance and brought it back. Also, and this something was brought back just recently. Look at this. Sam Wilson, a.k.a. Captain America. And you're probably thinking, wait, didn't he just come back as Captain America just recently? Yes, he did. And this actually came out 2 years prior to him giving up that role. For stupid reasons. Yeah. Nick Spencer for you. Yep. It's just by sheer coincidence after Secret Wars, which by the way, this came at the same period of time, he would actually be writing Captain America. Yeah, wrote both books at the same time. Matter of fact, the very next year, when this book ended, he wrote 2 books. He wrote Captain America, Sam Wilson Captain America, and Steve Rogers Captain America. Yep. Not a bad idea to throw him in here because you could say this Nick Spencer just advertising the Sam Wilson Captain America book. Kind of, yes, but not really. Oh, also, Machine Smith, who is an old Captain America villain. Actually, originally he was a Daredevil villain. Yep. Excuse me. Machine Smith at one point was Mr. Fear. Yeah, he's an enemy of Captain America, first period in page of Daredevil. Yes, he's the creation also of Stan Lee. Yeah, he's a Stan Lee character. You're thinking, really? Machine Smith is a Stan Lee character? Well, when he was Star Saxton, he was. But not Machine Smith, that was somebody else. But yeah, Machine Smith works for Ant-Man Security Solutions, and they basically deal with various stuff in here. Of course, Maria Hill's in here too. And then, of course, basically the Beetle shows up. Isn't it weird, though, that Lane Thompson England is now Bino, and you have his beautiful dog look normal? Yeah, and of course, one of the other recurring plot threads in this book, aside from the Hench app, is Cassie's attempt to become a superhero again. And that's a really good plot device. And that's a plot thread that spreads this whole book. That does get wrapped up by the end of the book, which nice and expensive does that. But for the start of this book, it's awesome. I give this book a 9.5 out of 10. I was actually originally considering buying this book. And then after a while, I decided I really wanted to read this series, but I don't want to buy it. So, ordered from the library. But this is an excellent book. It's a shame Marvel canceled this book after only 13 issues. Yeah, believe it or not, they launched this book the same year as the movie Ant-Man with Paul Rudd. And then they launched like a couple miniseries since then. Like after this book wrapped up, you had another Ant-Man book by Zeb Wells, which that was a good, really good book. And here's something really weird though about Ant-Man. Like if you go to like a Barnes Noble or maybe Books A Million, would you ever find this book there? Nope. You find the Zeb Wells book, no problem. But this book, for some reason, is not there. I have no idea why the heck that is. It's one of the most bizarre things I've ever seen. And this book only came out 7 years ago. 7 years ago. And yet they won't sell it for some reason. Yeah, Secret Wars is no problem. Okay, that came out the same year, but that's there. But this book isn't for some reason. Don't know why. All right, next up is Strange Academy, Volume 3, Witchcraft. This collects the final 6 issues of the Strange Academy series. Ended at issue 18, and then continued as a mini-series known as Strange Academy Files. So you're thinking, an ongoing series ends at 18 issues and have the mini-series called Finals. That sounds very familiar. X-Men First Class, not the movie, the original comic it took name from. Yeah, they did pretty much the same thing with that book too. Most of it with this book, we have to deal with prom, and also the one kid who actually had powers, but his jacket was taken away from him, who got expelled, despite the fact he was actually trying. And the way that the writer wrote this book, by the way, the book is written by Scotty Young. Yeah, keep this book written by Scotty Young, which makes this, fun fact, this was the third ever book that Scotty Young ever wrote. Yeah, third. Rocket Raccoon, Deadpool, and in this book. Yeah, you're probably thinking, that's interesting. You never knew. And here's the thing. Scotty Young is known for being a comedic artist. And he has another really good artist on here, Herberto Ramos. Yep. Who actually did work on... you probably think he did work on Doctor Strange? Nope. There are references to Doctor Strange in here, but no appearance of Doctor Strange in here. Well, that's because he's dead. Yeah, these issues came after his death. So, we do variations with Dylan, who was the son of Dormammu, and thus make him Clea's... I believe that makes him Clea's cousin. Yes. And also kind of makes Doctor Strange his... Does it make him Doctor Strange his uncle? Does it make Doctor Strange his uncle? No, not really. It's more like cousin-in-law. Yes, because Clea is Dormammu's niece. And Doyle is the cousin, so cousin-in-law. So, the way it's also written here is that the adult teachers, who, by the way, I have Zelda, who's from the Jason era for Doctor Strange, Magic, Dr. Voodoo, Scarlet Witch, various magical superheroes, and the way that they're written here is, and the kids are getting sick and tired of being treated like they apparently just don't care and don't take them seriously. That's how basically Scotty Young writes them. And this feels very similar to how the younger X-Men were written in the pages of the X-Men Assemble story arc. It is very, very similar. And I mean, very similar. And apparently because one kid got expelled, all these big-name students all walked out. They didn't quit the school, they walked out. So they ordered a bunch of pizza in the name of Doctor Strange. Yes, they had one kid dress up as Doctor Strange, which I thought was so hilarious. And then Dr. Voodoo basically confronts him about this. And of course, the woman who's leader of the group, who was supposed to be Dylan's date, she pointed out their bullcrap. Like, you guys don't treat us seriously as potential magicians. You rather treat us like beneath you or something like that. So, they rather basically take their own education into limbo. Or at least maybe Dormammu isn't mentioned. They go in another dimension anyways. So this does lead into Strange Academy Finals. Yep. Great book. Still only $13.99. Yeah. For a book about kids. And yeah. Great book. I give the book a 9.5 out of 10. Now, the only reason why I think Marvel did this, and this is my personal theory, I think the reason Marvel decided to do this Academy book, per se, is because Gotham Academy was popular. Yes. I as far as I can tell, I've never known the reason why the book was canceled. Like, when it was relaunched as second semester. It got canceled after only, not even 12 issues. No, seriously. The original series was 18 issues, and it was relaunched as second semester, and it lasted for 12. And then the book ended. And that book was awesome. By the way, it tied into one crossover of that book, and that was Robin War, Night of Helpless Stork. This book, meanwhile, has tied into officially one story, or one major crossover, or at least one mini event, the Death Doctor Strange had one shot for, but yeah, that was basically it when it comes to that. But yeah, it's strange to this book. Here's the thing: anything that happens in this book is never brought up in any books because the book is so secluded from the main Marvel stuff going on. Yeah, like you're probably thinking, do they reference the Doctor Strange Robin? He brings up a lot in this book, and apparently after Doctor Strange's death, Doctor Voodoo is taken up as position as the headmaster of the school. And here's the strange thing. Prior to this book, because they had canceled the Doctor Strange book at the start of 2020 because the stuff with the crazy with pandemic, that well, this book was the book he's featured in because God forbid we give Doctor Strange an ongoing series again, and then he dies, and now like you have this book here, and then you have ending replaced with First Class Finals. I'm not really sure why Marvel ended this book for. Is it terrible? No, it's actually really good. I mainly got into it because its name, Strange Academy, and plus it reminded me a little. Basically, the style of the way Scott Young writes it a bit, it reminds me a little bit of Gotham Academy, like a little bit mostly. But it's just a magical take. It's also the second series with name Academy, published by Marvel Comics. The only other Academy I could think of that had this name published by Marvel Comics that was really good was Avengers Academy, a book that was canceled after 39 issues. Yeah, that was back in 2013. This came out like just recently. Yep, but yeah, that's particularly a particular view. I might have time to do 2 more videos tonight, but that's probably all I could do. And no Doctor Who reviews tonight. I'll probably be done tomorrow, maybe. So next video is gonna be Black Clover. Okay, next video. Bye.